Hello everyone, let's begin our panel discussion on transforming curriculum for future workforce. I would like to welcome our moderator for the session, Mr. Ananth, Chairman, Focus SkillPro. And now introducing our panelists for the session, we have with us Mr. Aditya V. Berlia, co-founder and Pro-Chancellor, Apeejay University, Mr. Brad Schiller, founder and CEO, Prompt, Mr. Mohan Kannegal, CEO, India, Eruditus Group, Mr. Amit Nevatia, Education Program Global Head, Talent and Organizational Transformation, UST Group. I would request all the delegates to please keep posting your questions in the chat box, and our panel will address a selected few towards the end of the session. Over to you, Mr. Rao.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Aparna. Welcome, everyone. I hope we can engage you for the next 55 minutes or 50 minutes. Thank you, all the panelists. Happy to be here with a stellar set of panelists. I'm going to request that anybody in the audience has questions as we speak, just type them out because we will be looking at the questions as quickly as we can. With a fairly large panel here, and you've been listening to a lot of sessions, we know that skills is a very important part of future, and skills is no more what you can learn today and utilize, but it's a lifelong learning, and we've probably heard that quite a few times, right from your other talks probably, and they're from the world and from the Prime Minister and so forth. So we're going to touch on that important topic today, and we're going to get different perspectives here from each of the panelists. I will request each panelist to spend a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, what they do, and how they see the future of skills. Can I start with Amit from Amazon, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and it's an honor to be here on this panel amongst all such august members. So my name is Amit Nevatia, and I lead the education programs for Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud arm for Amazon Retail. Today, as you've correctly mentioned, Mr. Ananth, that skilling is a hot topic of discussion in every forum. And as far as India is concerned, I think we are seeing a rapid change in the education and skilling landscape in India. And as AWS, we're trying to help customers adapt and scale their services by supporting administrators, teachers, students, and entrepreneurs. And we look forward to enhance our understanding of the best way to support this transformation by being a part of such a panel. Overall, at AWS, we have several programs where we work with K-12 segment, the higher education segment, to provide emerging technology skills, which we have mapped in terms of the industry requirements and the various reports that have been issued by World Economic Forum, the Gartner of the world, in terms of the skill gaps that exist between what the industry needs and what the academic institutions are delivering. And based on that skill gap analysis, we have tried to curate content and provide that as a supplemental learning to the higher education space. However, in the last 2 to 3 years, we have witnessed that it's not just about supplemental learning that we should talk about. It's also about bringing about a change in the curriculum and in the offering that the education institutions give. Right. So our endeavor is to work with higher education institutions, look at the gaps which can be fulfilled by our intervention, by intervention from technology companies, purely from a perspective of hard skills, because we believe that soft skills are something which are the expertise areas of universities. But we concentrate on the hard skills and look at mitigating the gaps between the industry and the academia. And more we can discuss during the course of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit, for that short and quick introduction. Can I request Mohan from Eruditus say a few words?
Thanks, Ananth, and good to be here. I represent Eruditus. We work with the best universities in India, across the world, creating programs. yes, the topic is super topical right now, and would be interesting to add to that discussion. From our side, yes, we are working on all the new age skills. We are working on skills that are also timeless. So many things that we work in the area of skills as a company, and looking forward to contribute in this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Mohan. Aditya, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. A very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aditya Berlia. I'm the co-promoter of the Apeejay, Stya and Swaran group, apart from a wide variety of verticals, including pharmaceutical development and such. Most people know us for our education social commitment, the Apeejay Education, where we run something like 13 schools, 16 colleges, and of course the Apeejay Stya University. For some numbers, around 35,000 full-time students, 65,000 alumni, and a broader 250,000 stakeholders. We are absolutely obsessed about the future of work. And I'm just going to make the quick points on that. We believe there is increased competition, which has led to constant disruption. Flatter structures have led to entrepreneurship. The expiry of knowledge, which is consistent, has extended even to fundamentals and to history. The 24/7 work environment which has come in. The Pareto rule, which is 80-20, is becoming 90-20 on a global scale of value capture. That is 10%, 20% of the companies are going to capture 80%, 90% of all the value. And there's a need for now specialists who can actually connect over multiple fields. And we have found 11 distinct fields when we set up our academic systems that each person needs to know. And of course, customers, B2C, B2B, want constant innovation. So for me, the big question always was, what sort of education and curriculum allows a student to thrive in this environment once they go? And so I'm very excited about this environment, this entire conversation. But I'd just like to make one big macro point for us. For us, curriculum has to be experienced, not taught. And if you look at these 7 points, almost all of them are not something that you can just read from a book. They have to be experienced, they have to be practiced before you can actually enter that sort of 21st century workplace. And our job is to figure out how to do that in the shortest amount of time possible.
Great. Thank you, Aditya. That's helpful. Hold on to that thought about 11 specializations or specialists and that experience curriculum. So we'll ping more on that a little bit later. Can I request Kavita to give her introduction, please?
Kavita, you're mute.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kavita, and I'm the global head for organizational transformation and and it is taking over our lives completely. So it is something that we need to look at, not just the way we work, but also the way we live. And we need to realign, redefine, and refocus how we build those skills in our personal as well as our professional lives. And it's important to become a lifelong learner just to stay relevant and employable in today's day and age. Looking forward to the conversation and some of the deeper aspects that we would be exploring over the next hour or so.
Thank you, Kavita. Appreciate. Payal, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Ananth. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be sharing the panel with the technology and industry stalwarts. I'm Payal Rajpal, and I head South Asia for Robotex International, which is a 20-year-old institution working on robotics Olympiads with school and college students. I also founded Hack the Crisis India in March 2020, which worked on finding solutions solutions. So resilience model, solution finding, portal via hackathons. And we successfully concluded 2 largest hackathon of the country. And so when we talk about the future of workforce, it's been, the last half decade that we've been working very closely with automation, AI, via robotics. And what we've seen via the Olympiads and hackathons is that the available talent pool, when we did physical competitions, we saw the industry and academia collaborations coming out because of the talent pool and the innovation that was created during these championships. What we saw in a digital model during the COVID-19 hackathon is that a fully digital environment also enabled to keep this practice on. So happy to be here and look forward to touch upon these points during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Payal. With that, I would request Brad, who I think is in the East Coast in the US and probably at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning. Brad, please.
It's only 6 a.m. currently, but thank you very much. So thank you for having me. My name is Brad Schiller. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Prompt. Our mission is to make people better writers. The first country that we actually expanded to outside the United States was India, in particular because of the people of India and kind of the need for improved writing skills, particularly related to the service and kind of knowledge-oriented economy. And so we firmly believe that if you think of like the critical skills for the workforce, that writing is probably the most important. And actually, poor writing is one of the biggest problems in the entire world today. It actually holds the entire world back because it actually slows the velocity of getting big, meaningful things done. And that's because it creates misunderstanding. And if somebody can't write, they can't really communicate their thinking in a meaningful way. And so I've had this experience firsthand. I was at McKinsey for about 5 years. And one of the #1 things that I saw was that most people that I was working with, my clients, had really good ideas, but they were actually unable to translate those ideas into something that their executives could actually understand, right? And that was a huge part of my role and what I did. And when you further think about it, and some of the best companies in the entire world, what they do is one of their core skills is actually writing. So I'll use like Amazon as a quick case study there. They actually banned PowerPoint and they only write like these 6-page memos that they really kind of put a lot of detailed and structured thinking into. And so like Amazon Prime, Amazon Web Services, all of these other things have actually started as writing. And I know we have an Amazon person on here and they have very specific ways of writing and communicating. And that's how things get done really quickly at that company. So there's a few thoughts here as we get kicked off, but the critical part of this is that writing is basically equivalent to structured thinking. And it's really hard without writing to actually have clear thinking people can understand and act on. Second is that we actually need to build these writing skills to synthesize what we call like writing to learn skills, to synthesize information across sources in order to be able to identify what to do. And then the third is that we actually need to build these daily professional written communication skills. It's critical. And what is fascinating about this is that half of all written communication, half of it is actually misinterpreted. There's research on this, that half of written communication is misinterpreted. So we're constantly kind of at odds with each other in the workplace, especially given how much communication is done digitally right now. Globally, about 75% of all workplace communication is done digitally. And so there's a big problem that we need to solve there to actually just improve writing skills to actually make everything function better. So thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Brad. I guess that leaves just me. Just to introduce myself, I'm an entrepreneur that's focused on B2B edtech SaaS platform. I guess we provide e-learning for students and e-skilling for enterprises to skill their workforce. That's what we do, and we've been doing that over the last 10, 12 years. Work very closely with Microsoft as a partner. What I believe is that, first of all, skills and skilling is lifelong, which means that it's not just when you're in class or student or college or working that you're going to be looking for skills. Now it is a continuous process. So gone are those days when we say I'm a BTech and so, it doesn't really matter. 4 years later, it's really how you're relevant today that matters. We also believe that it's going to be a much more mobile first learning. So most learning is going to happen on the mobile, and partly because it is anytime, anywhere learning, but partly because it's the capabilities today are significant. Your connectivity, your capability of the device. So we essentially try to say that if you're working in a company and the company needs to invest in your learning, which means that constantly you're on the go learning. So that's what we try to facilitate. So happy to be on this panel with a fantastic set of panelists. We will, like I said, I would prefer that we have more audience questions so that we can put that back to the panel. So if you're sending out your questions, they're going to reach us, and we're going to try and take that first come, first serve. But until your questions start coming, the listeners, I have the privilege of asking questions. So my first one is obviously, I think Brad's answered it in his own words of writing skills being the most important, but Amit referred to some hard skills. Aditya referred to 11 specializations. I would like both of you gentlemen just to talk a little bit about what do you mean by hard skills, Amit, and what are those that are most relevant right now?
Yeah, so I think I've used a very old terminology of soft skills and hard skills, right? Today, people talk about tech skills, and that's what I exactly meant when I talked about hard skills. Because when we look at from the job perspective, right, there has been a lot of talk that there is a artificial intelligence and robotics which is going to take away jobs from people, and there's going to be less and less number of jobs in the market. But I think the way we need to look at it is it's not about the lack of jobs which are going to come up. It's about the kind of jobs which are going to be there in the market. And that's going to substantially change. That's going to require a very different set of skills in the workforce, right? The routine jobs, the routine activities may be very well taken over by robots and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But that's where the difference of being a human comes in, right? The human being is empowered to think critically, to think differently, and come up with innovative solutions, and use that in building solutions and taking the human race forward. So the kind of jobs would evolve, and that would require a different set of skills. And that's exactly when we intervene or engage with universities and higher education institutions. We need to paint that picture of what kind of jobs are going to be available, and how can the academia align their teaching and learning process towards these kind of jobs. That fear factor has to be removed. It's not about the lack of jobs or people losing jobs. Yes, as you currently mentioned, lifelong learning. You have to keep on acquiring new skills. You need to keep on learning. I was there in one of the other discussions the other day, and one of the vice chancellors said that during the lockdown, the universities were open, the campuses may have been closed, right? So I think the same logic applies when we say that even though we were in lockdown, the learning process was still on. And that has to be inculcated in our students, that it's not just enough to get a BTech degree and then say, okay, I've learned enough. Now I'm going to, conquer the world. It doesn't happen that way. The lifelong learning aspect has to be kept on, and the new skills have to be acquired to be able to be successful in this world.
Absolutely. Well taken. Aditya, you were talking about 11 specializations, so to speak. What did you have in mind, some of those?
I'm going to compress a 2-hour workshop into a minute as quickly as I can. Essentially, about 10 years ago, when we were setting up the Apeejay Satya University, we tried to answer this question that how do we create students who are prepared for the 21st century? And we were very lucky. We had a lot of people from around the world who sort of help us articulate what that really meant. And my full thanks to Dr. Henry Rasovsky, who was the former dean of the Faculty of Arts of Sciences at Harvard University, who really sat with us and tried to articulate that, okay, if you were to take all the subjects in the world, right, and you distill them down, can you bring them down to one fundamental subject or framework that is completely different in how we view the world? So to try and explain it, we see, look, there is one world, but there are various different ways of looking at it. The 21st century person needs to have highly specialized hard skills, as Ameetjay has said, but then they are useless unless they can speak these 11 languages, different frameworks of how other people view that same world, so that tomorrow, if you're trying to create anything now, a product or a service, you are able to communicate that effectively and understand the perspective of these 11 ways of looking at the world. And some of them include, basic science, they include history, they include engineering, social sciences, and so on. So we did this exercise, took us 6 months to a lot of fighting, a lot of going back and forth on arriving at a consensus. And we tried to go from 11 to 10 or to 9. So people ask us why 11. We said, well, we couldn't go below 11. But we figured out that there were 11 distinct trainings that most people go through when education. And if you put 2 of those training people who have only been trained completely in that in a room, it's almost impossible for them to communicate unless they find some bridging language between them. And so when we say these 11 subjects, what we really want is that everybody, apart from the highly specialized hard skills fields they do, they should at least understand, at least get the perspective of these 11 other ways of looking at the world. So if they are trying to create a product or service, if they are trying to create an NGO, if they're trying to accomplish anything else, when they are sitting, they can actively translate what they want to do to these 11 other people. And when these 11 other people are trying to tell them what they are doing, they are able to translate in among themselves. And for us, that is one of the most important 21st century work skill that you need.
Perfect. Aditya, if you'd like to throw some additional thoughts, lifelong learning you mentioned, and just curious to understand, what key skills you see as being a part of this lifelong curriculum, right? You're muted, Kavita. You're on mute still.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now?
Yes.
All right. To log in through the phone because there's a huge network issue at my end. So I think when I spoke about lifelong learning, it's something that we inculcate a lot at UST, both in our personal as well as our professional lives. And just to give an example, 20 years back when UST started, right, it was a group of about 14 people who got into a little conference room in Trivandrum of all places in India. And they decided to create one of the best IT companies in the world. Of those 14, we still have about 10 of them in the organization, and they have been learning consistently. So we've had them do developer roles. They are now senior members within our organization. Some have become the COO, some have become the CHRO. So you have people who have constantly learned, and we've seen them get a success. But I think the last 6 months has brought to light some of these softer aspects of lifelong learning, saying that it's not just enough for us to keep ourselves relevant from a professional standpoint to stay employable, but also look at what are some of the softer skills that we need to build for tomorrow, like dealing with ambiguity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, adaptability, and flexibility. One of the key things that we did the moment we realized that we're getting into this lockdown is roll out a DigiB campaign where we looked at digital behaviors and said, how do we train our managers to stay connected with their people? We're used to staying together in a cohort within a workspace to really have the engagement. So we said we are going to do remote working, but we wanted to look at remote more from operating effectively from a distance and not look at remote as being distant and unapproachable. We said, how do we still bring that level of engagement? And that's how we brought about these behaviors and started applying them and seeing how is it that we can do it. So when I talked about lifelong learning, I think it's just the entire ability to be agile, where you're able to unlearn, relearn, and just keep looking at what are some of the new aspects that you can keep doing both in your personal and your professional life just to stay relevant as a human being, professional.
Interesting, Kavita. Thank you. So I have my own personal experience there, where, we're talking about learning happening all the time, right? We've, for example, deployed a solution for a food tech company, a delivery company, and one of these large organizations where we put out a skill for communication skills. And that's what something everybody was learning on their mobile. These are delivery drivers. And there was so much, let me say, traction for that course on how to speak basic English and how to communicate with customers in basic English. And that was extremely, let me say, enlightening just to know that while his delivery is going on, his, let me say, aspiration to improve his communication skills is significantly increased. And that's the same thing when we do for deployment of schools, not just academics, but the skills in the schools seems to be a very central and vital thing. So I'll go on to the next question. I think from the audience, I think one of the things, what other skills are aspirational, and if not just STEM, right, which seems to be hogging the light or finding the spotlight, as the question was termed. Any thoughts on that? I think, Brad, you touched on writing skills, and maybe Payal will have a few more things to add. Mohan.
I thought Brad is taking that.
Yes.
So, firstly, I would agree, especially with Brad, that good writing, I think, can make the world far more productive. There are enough and more examples of that. One of the recent examples I read about is a deck that NASA was using for the Challenger spacecraft. Apparently, the way the bullets were structured was so confusing that people took a call to go ahead and launch, which then led to all kinds of problems. But I mean, there are a million such examples every day at work. Apparently, doesn't fall off, but it causes all kinds of disruption. So, so I would agree with Brad that you could be an awesome programmer, a great data scientist, but you still write well. I would just add to that saying you should also be able to speak well. So those would be two important things. Given how digital we are, I would agree with Brad that speaking might become that much important. Right, separately, I would also add the subject of the topic, which is psychology and spirituality and all of that bucket of managing the self. Because I mean, very broadly, it's called managing the self, but there's so many little parts. Super important because in a world of data science and AI and that, I think we should still know how to manage ourselves and our own mind and so on. So those would be two other non-data science, non-robotics, non-AI.
Yeah, and Ananth, adding on to that, yeah. So acquiring of new skills remains imperative as the role of automation and AI continues to strengthen. But to craft a talent strategy, I think that there are four kind of skills over and about digital, which is higher cognitive, social, emotional skills, adaptability, and resilience. And to develop this muscle, we would need to sort of strengthen these skills over and above the digital skills that we're talking about. Because when we say cognitive problem-solving skills, redesign, innovation in the increasing autonomous environment, we've experienced that with our not only the workshops that we conduct in Future Skills, but also at the robotics Olympiads that we execute, where we see our youngest participant at an age of 6, and at our hackathon we saw the participant at 65 who was a data scientist. And what we've seen is that thousands of students, when they're participating in a national event, to reinforce resilience in their ability to manage time, boundaries, their self-awareness, confidence, self-reliance in participating in various competition category and improvising their product in a tight schedule time to be able to make it from a quarterfinal to a podium finisher. So over and above the digital skills, these are quite imperative as well.
Great, that's helpful, Payal. Brad, would you want to add to that, or shall I get the next question?
I'll just briefly add to this. I think, one of the things that we think a lot about is what we call writing to learn skills. And so when we talk about lifelong learning, what we need to actually think about is there's a couple of, there's some basic kind of it's kind of like a pyramid where you actually have reading comprehension, being able to summarize, synthesize, and then synthesize information across sources to be able to actually come up with thought and back that with some sort of evidence, right? And so when we think about from a lifelong learning perspective, and we see this here in the United States, India, many other countries throughout the world, is that you have a lot of people that, for all of us on this call, that are kind of in the upper echelon of probably being able to comprehend sources, summarize information, synthesize it into something meaningful. Yet there's a massive part of the population that in order to build these lifelong skills where they can actually, kind of learn on your own, right? Self-learning, we actually need to build those core foundational skills for writing to learn, such as reading comprehension, summarization skills, etc. And we see that that's, at least 3/4, or more of the population actually struggles with those skills. So just kind of laying that out as it's something that we think about literally every day, but it's something that is I think critical in how we need to kind of think about upskilling the workforce. We actually have to build some of these foundational skills that unfortunately are not occurring at the lower grades that should be occurring for skill acquisition.
And I think 3/4 is an understatement, if anything. So well put. I'll go to the next question from the audience, and it kind of takes us into the next set of, let me say, a dimension of discussion. Obviously, industry and academia collaboration has been a challenge, and especially when it comes to government universities, adjusting to the new workforce requirement is always a challenge. And in that context, I guess we have the new education policy, which is probably the biggest thrust that's come in the last some time on trying to, let me say, transition the, academia towards, workforce requirements, if anything. So love to get your thoughts on one, what are some of the things, opportunities you see for educational institutions today as the new education policy rolls out, and two, when do you see some of that being reality? Because there's so much talk about new education policy, and what's not clear is where is the funds going to come from, how fast is the transition going to happen? None of that is clear. So I'm going to start with maybe Mohan and then Aditya, just to talk about what are the key benefits you would see from an EP, and how would you see that impact right away and in the near term?
Thanks, Ananth. So for me, from the NEP, the big takeaways for higher ed, I'm not talking about primary ed, which is another bucket, but for higher ed, the key advantages are this cross-disciplinary learning, which is a very big deal. Many of the programs, many of the technology today is really cross-disciplinary. So that's a good one. The thrust to online education is another good one. So those would be my two big ones. On cross-disciplinary, just to give you an example, when I was in college, we built a solar-powered car, but I was in production engineering. So the faculty who had to grade the project, his first question and his grade was that this is not a production engineering project, so we'll give you very less marks for it. So that's the kind of stuff which we hope the NEP will change, because we were so passionate, right? So I'm talking 1995 solar powered car. Okay, so that's one thing. So we're hoping that some of these innovations in India will drive people to become an Elon Musk and build an electric car and all of that, right? So that's one bucket. The other bucket, of course, is the thrust towards online is a very mathematically policy-led important thing. We just can't afford as a nation to build the number of universities, physical universities and colleges, etc., to educate the enrollment gap that we have, the gross enrollment ratio gap that we have. So online is just no-brainer for us. Okay, just as online e-com essentially was a no-brainer for India because we don't have the space for so many malls. We don't have the space for so many colleges. So both of these, I think, are very good things. To answer your question of when will it happen, I'm an optimist, but also a realist. Back in 2008, we drafted a online and distance education vision paper, which eventually kind of worked its way up. Which maybe 2 or 3 lines from it is also borrowed into the NEP, maybe. So things take a lot of time, but I see that this government is much more enthusiastic, much faster, much more pushy. So fingers crossed, I think things should happen very fast.
Got it. And towards the end, I'll ask more specific number, Mohan, and hold you to that. But Aditya, if you want to talk about it.
One, I don't think many people have actually read the full policy. I highly encourage everyone to do so. If you haven't, I have a wonderful 2.5-hour line read, which I did for CII. Google it line by line and what's the impact. This is an absolute transformation. This isn't a let's do industry academic interface, let's do some skilling, let's do blah, blah, blah. Insert your favorite buzzword, Tambola, Housey here. This is a ground up, once in a 2 generation, 34 years pending complete transformation of the education ground up. And I think anything less, I think people are in for a very rude shock. And so please, I encourage everybody in the audience to read it. It's worth it. School, primary, early education, higher education, you will not recognize it. You'll have, they will, if it's actually implemented, and I'll come to that very quickly. What your frame of education is, my frame of education is our understanding. The moment this happens, we will not recognize our education system. We won't understand how it works. We have to relearn all the things. You have to relearn all the acronyms even to start with. So I just want to make sure that people get this. This is not a tweak. This is not an adjustment. It is an absolute revolution, and it is well deserved. I love 80% of it. Very happy it's there. I won't delve into it because it's huge. It's massive. I read the 365 version, the 1000-page version, then the 80 version, then the 65. And if you really want to understand what's happening, you read all 4. You understand the distilling, the compromises, the political intrigue that went behind the scenes to really get down to the 65. And you have to start asking yourselves, there are these beautiful one-liners there, which earlier were, 50 pages. They've just put one line there because they didn't want to call attention to it. So there's a lot of very nice surprises in store if people haven't read it, the entire thing. So please go read it. But in terms of implementation, this is not a draft. It is not a proposal. It is not a bill. It's a cabinet document which has been signed and passed by cabinet. So, which was a shock to me that it happened, but it happened, thank God. So it's well on its way. Now, the problem is that they have to probably at least modify 12 to 15 laws is what we think to actually do the implementation. So it's not going to be easy. There's talk that they might have to do a constitutional amendment at the way they are going, but at least 15 major laws have to be remodeled, scrapped, changed, etc. to do it. The NEP itself is basically designed around 3 deadlines. There's a 2021 deadline where the majority of the school education part hits. There's the 2025 deadline where the majority of higher education part hits. And then there's a 2030 sort of final sign off. If you haven't done it by then, go jump off a bridge deadline. Where it really pushes in. Now, this has to be converted into law. People are going to wake up in the next 6-7 months. I envision mass protests across the country from all sorts of stakeholders as they finally discover, oh my God, what on earth has happened? It will happen. We've seen what the GST rollout was 4 years ago. I do not expect an orderly, happy way of happening. So it's going to be a mess. I'm happy it's going to go through. We'll all suffer for the next 2 to 3 years. But I just want to tell everybody, just as GST for better or worse has been worth it, this will be worth it. So hang on to your hats. It's going to be an insane ride.
Great. Hey, thank you, Aditya. So it looks like, there's 3 big shifts happening. If I were to summarize some of the statements that all of you panelists have made. One is the fact that, what you learn in college is not what you live with rest of your life, and skilling is a constant process, right? Second is this whole NEP that's essentially changing the way education is delivered, right? And how students have to learn. And third is, I think what Mohan briefly referred to is the whole online and e-learning kind of experience, right? So learning is happening anytime, anywhere. Skills have to be imbibed anywhere, anytime, and continuously. and then there is a whole college education that's going. So with all of these, I'm looking for what advice you would have as panelists for the entrepreneurs and for the educators out there, and what are some of the new opportunities you see come out in very very rapid form. We're seeing a lot of deals happen right now, and investments happen, acquisitions happen, M&A happening in the edtech space. We foresee that in the education space overall, right? Would love to, I know, Amit, from an Amazon standpoint and how Amazon is looking at the change, and maybe Kavita from UST can kind of give a little bit of thoughts, and maybe Brad can then add to kind of what he's seeing worldwide beyond India.
Thanks, Ananth. I think from an edtech perspective, what COVID has done is actually it has acted as a catalyst. We had been seeing a lot of edtech solutions and organizations, startups coming up in India, institutions where contemplating on using online technologies for various aspects, whether it is the LMS or it's the assessment or it's about the teaching and learning delivery. But what COVID has done is actually jolted them and said, okay, don't think about it, just go ahead and do it. So we see a surge in the adoption of technology in all aspects of education, whether it is the delivery of teaching and learning processes, the LMS, and understanding the student per se, because traditionally in India, we have never tried to understand the student. It's always been that the teacher has to be understood and not the student, right? So we've seen that massive change, and as AWS, I think we have been endeavoring to work with these education technology companies and startups. We have programs like EdStart. We have where we promote and handhold educational startups to build their business and build their technology architecture. We have programs like AWS Educate, where we work with academic institutions. So all these things are going to add up and get accentuated. And I think NEP has come at the right time. Again, I think for the government also, it was the fact that the COVID acted upon as a thrust to get the NEP out of the door into the hands as a policy during this time. It is the most apt time to actually bring about that change. Any which ways, there are so many changes happening in the world. So that's what I would say. And skills gaps, if you look at skills gap, it's not just a mere inconvenience. It's about the financial and the business repercussions that can be grave. IDC has predicted that in 2020, 90% of the organizations will actually adjust their project plans. They will have delayed products and services. They will be incurring losses. So I think uh, this is the time to actually build that skilling landscape in India and really uh, take benefit of the demographic dividend that we have been talking about.
Right. I think, and before Kavita joins that, I think one of the questions that was coming very related to what we are saying is that the skill gap is that increasing because with the elite getting kind of elite already getting technological education, is that gap thing. So I think with e-learning, with reach improving, that's probably not the case where the gap's increasing. In fact, the gap will shrink because the best of global education will be available to in the most rural of towns in that sense. But that reality has to happen. It's not yet there. But I think that if you look back 3 years ago, what a tier 2 town had from an education standpoint, or 10 years ago to now, there's a significant shift that's happening. So love to get Payal and even Kavita's thoughts on how do you transform curriculum to kind of make sure that everybody is benefiting from this change that's happening.
No, I agree with what Amit was saying earlier, right? Where we never thought of the learner as much. We always thought of what was required for the organization and what the teacher wanted to do. One of the things that we did during COVID was we rolled out a 21-day transformation program where we opened it out for the organization. And we said, don't give us any extra time. The time that you use to commute, we'll use that time to help upskill you so that you're ready to move into a higher order role. And we created programs so that people would not really come back saying that, hey, you now want me to work from home, and you also want me to learn. So we said, you are going to spend that time traveling to and back from work, and that's the time we used to upskill you. And we saw tremendous uptake of that program. We had almost 3,000 hours of learning come in 21 days. We had about 250 people move into higher order roles. And it's interesting now because when we have roundtables and we start talking to people, they start talking about their kids, how they are studying STEM, how they are studying coding, and they can have technological conversations with them more than, have you done your homework? And it's interesting because I have a great grandmother, and it used to be a thing to just go down and meet her once in a way. But with COVID coming up, we were extremely surprised. She's managed to figure out how to call us on the phone. It's something that she would have never done before. She's 90 and she's learning technology. So I don't think it's going to be easy. But for me as a CLO and someone who's always been in the learning field, I think the most important skill that we need to teach people is to learn. So we need to teach people how to learn. They have forgotten that. It's always been a package that's given to them to do it in a certain manner, and that's been constituted as learning. So we need to start teaching how to learn. So that's something that we are working at UST to see how can we redefine the entire learning paradigm. And NEP is a welcome change, and we're hoping that we meet all of those guidelines and sooner rather than later.
Payal, if you can throw some light on how Robotex is trying to kind of add to that whole learning curve, where you mentioned someone, you've got students at 6 years, and then you've got students at 65 years. Would love to hear how that transformation is happening.
Yes, so touching upon the NEP and how we had embedded that structure almost like half a decade ago. So, I mean, the new education policy marks a quantum jump in equalizing education. So, one rooted in the Indian ethos and traditions, and equally in the 21st century knowledge systems and technologies. So taking quick 5 pointers of the NEP highlight, which we had implemented and further improvised on it during the COVID times, is, for example, coding to be taught from class 6 onwards, and our workshops are for ages starting 6. Secondly, e-content in regional languages, and we did that for across 5 states of the country, and we saw a fantastic success rate, because the way we measure our programs is what has the student created after they've concluded a level 1 or a level 5. It's either a physical model or a enterprise or an app solution. The ability to have multiple entry and exit programs is what we gave. You don't have to be a part of level 1 to be taking a level 3 class. The content which focused on idea, application, problem solving, and not just screen time and technology, hardware, software. And the increased focus in vocational studies from the school level itself that the NEP says, and how we embedded technology into things like plumbing for the ITI girls. We conducted 1,000 girls workshop for government schools on girls who build robots, and the solutions that came out were everything from an autonomous robot that has a UV ray box inbuilt in it. So yes, we did see that a shift in curriculum and adding on these 4 pointers made a vast difference. And then when we sort of link this up with the future of workplace, which we think is sensitive, dignified, and responsive people practices, and then evaluate the expectations from future workplace, hours spent pretending to be a part of the work or the outcome. And what we saw here is that a 10-hour classroom study, physically, pre-COVID days, was, the learning curve shortened to dramatically half the time when we were doing this, in spite of the digital divide, because we gave them the freedom of time and downloadable activities and a few other experimentation and innovations that we did.
Great, Pai. Brad, would you like to give us kind of a not just an India perspective, but a global perspective, and of course on writing skills being important, but skills in general, and how the rest of the world is kind of seeing it a little bit different from India, or or in very similar to India, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so I think there's a, and I think this kind of ties in, I think, with the NEP, which I've done some reading on and such, is that, in a lot of the conversation here is that globally, there's more and more emphasis being placed on some of the, obviously with like coding and those types of skills, but also with just in general, the more liberal arts types of education, where those are building these kind of more transferable skill sets of problem solving, learning. What Kavita was saying is like kind of teaching people how to learn and become lifelong learners is becoming increasingly important. And I think that is, critical across the world. And I know here in the United States, we focus a lot, there's a lot of that's focused on that. Additionally, when we talk about online education, in the United States, and most people don't know this, but pre-COVID, 35% of all higher education students took at least one course online. Okay. So what this has merely done is kind of expedited the process of moving to online education, which I think has like a few critical things that we need to think about that's going to have massive impact. And you're already seeing that with a number of companies actually in India, such as Baiju, Unacademy, etc., where you get some significant benefits. One is what I call consistent instruction, which is that you're able to actually take a lot of like the leading education research and actually implement that at scale, where you're kind of eliminating what we call the educator variability problem, which is that a lot of educators don't have the skills, knowledge, or mindset to actually teach in the ways that we need to be able to teach, right? So we're actually focused on the learner versus the educator, like we were talking about. Secondly is that technology enables much more individualized and adaptive learning. And we see that as a huge benefit, especially related to like Bloom's Two Sigma problem, where, and this was way back in the day, you discover by one-to-one tutoring of an average student using mastery learning, which means basically mastering one skill before moving to the next, that student will perform 2 standard deviations better than the average student in a control group, okay, just by having one-to-one tutoring. Now, we can actually now, with technology, deliver that at scale, right? And actually using humans for the one-to-one in certain subjects, such as writing, and using technology for the one-to-one in other subjects, such as math and so on and so forth, and actually supplementing, real people with technology to actually build to mastery learning for every single student. And I think we're seeing that transition now. We see a lot of that actually at the forefront of that, actually in India, which is fantastic. But we're starting to see that transition, United States, Southeast Asia, China, Middle East, Europe lags a little behind there, but you're starting to see that transition all over the place, just because the scale that we need to work at to upskill the world.
Absolutely, Brad, I agree with that. I guess we are kind of coming towards the end of the session. I think there's one more question. How can we ensure accessibility in terms of digital education? I think we all touched on it, but very interesting. For example, we give digital solutions for schools, and we know of one school, for example, a high-end school, one of the best ones in the country, probably had a fourth grader stuck in the US in the summer trip before school started here because of the COVID travel restriction. Interestingly, they were able to log in and get into all the classes. They were able to see digital content that the school was putting out. This is one of the best schools, putting out very high quality digital content, teaching them, and they had that access to that solution. But at the same time, what we realized is that in a tier 3 town that had implemented a similar solution, right, where the same content was being utilized, right, we know that there are the poorest people who didn't have a mobile that would go borrow a mobile for a 1 hour class from the place where her dad was working as a driver, and get that 1 hour of class or 2 hours of class with that mobile, and attend the same class the same quality of content, the same assessments, and be able to learn the same fourth grader out there. Two completely different individuals at different places on earth seeing the same level of quality of education. So I think that is somewhat the beginning of what I think is learning at a global level, reducing the cost due to technology. With that, I don't think we have time for any more questions. So I would like to take this 2 minutes to kind of have a quick rapid fire questions for the panelists, so we can cover more in very little time. The answer can't exceed 3 words. So and you obviously can't take more than 5 seconds. But I'm going to put out there right there. What is, if you had a son or daughter, let's say 12-year-old, 10 or 12-year-old, what is one skill that you want them to have right now over the next 3-4 years? One skill. We'll start with
go ahead with that.
Yeah, please.
Can I go ahead with it? Yeah. So I
Yeah,
think
please, Amit.
one skill would be curious and learn.
Curious learn is accepted, but the one skill part was not accepted because that's more than 3 words there. Okay, Aditya goes next.
Personal responsibility for their learning.
Brad.
Love of learning.
Love of learning. Payal and Kavita.
I would say rethink would be the one word answer, and predominantly using technology to rethink and weaving in the 3 old R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
We'll disqualify you the next time, but we got the essence. Did I miss someone, Kavita? We lost you there, Kavita. Maybe you can answer. I'm not sure if I'm not able to follow, but we still can't hear you. Growth mindset, did you say? Okay, got it. Okay, the next question, jobs of the future. Again, you've got this.
I didn't answer.
Oh, please. Mohan, is that? Or Aditya?
Yeah.
Mohan,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Math, English, and imagination.
Math, English, imagination. If I have to add to it, I would say communication skills. The next one, jobs of the future, right? And we're talking to college students. Now you've got suddenly a 16-year-old or a 18-year-old. What is one job you would prepare him for? Where would be the most aspirational or in-demand job? Just one job. Assuming he's going to job workforce. We'll start with Kavita, Payal, Aditya, that order, please. Kavita, please go ahead. I can't hear you.
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence. Job, one kind of job role which you would want him to.
Intelligence communicator.
Okay. Payal, you'd go next.
A job in reality technologies.
Reality technologies. Aditya.
Psychologist.
Okay. Amit.
Cloud computing specialist. That was obvious.
Developer.
Developer. Okay. Did we get everyone? Okay. It looks like not.
Ananth, you missed me out again.
Okay, sorry, Mohan. I found my screen. Sorry.
No.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I would say prepare for the unknown. Job descriptions are dying rather fast.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, that's the second one. NEP is a reality in X years or in year dash 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. NEC where you see the maximum benefits come out. Reality in year, Aditya.
2022.
Brad.
Agree with Aditya. He's the expert in this, it seems.
Mohan, I should have asked Aditya last after he read all those documents about it. Yeah, but.
So while on the call, I also glanced at the document again. I think it's a decade away.
A decade away. Okay. Amit,
2025.
2025. Payal,
2025 as well.
great. And Kavita.
2025 for me as well.
Great. Okay. So you all are a little more pessimistic than I am. Probably 2023 is probably what I would vote. But that's all the time we have right now. Would have loved to ask a lot more questions, but I think clearly 3-4 things that stood out from the panel. Online education is here to stay, and it's going to democratize education. Skills is a lifelong process and a continuous process. NEP is very, very good. Is just how fast it gets implemented. Those seem to be some of the key things that came out. But thank you all. Enjoyed moderating this panel for 55 minutes or 50 minutes with 7 panelists is a super accomplishment, I would say, in terms of getting points across. Thank you very much. Appreciate the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all our panelists.
Turn it over to Aparna. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
With us today. I would also like to thank our digital transformation partner, Dell Technologies, our silver partner, Lead Square, and our delegates for being here with us. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.